Most of the time we do fairly sensible tactics on this channel, but sometimes you just need to put two traitor primarchs together and see who will win in a fight. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel. Today we'll be mathing out some single combats between Magnus and Mortarion, fighting for the honour and glory of the Thousand Sons and Death Guard respectively. These guys have a lot of similarities on the tabletop, even if they don't particularly get on in the lore. They're both toughness 7 demon primarchs with wings that clock in between 400 and 500 points, have very strong close combat and access to decent psychic powers. In this contest we'll be having a 1 versus 1 fight. We'll allow them both the chance to cast their psychic powers, deny their rival, shoot with any weapons they might have, and each fight 1 round of close combat with any buffs that they've managed to accumulate. We'll look at how much damage they inflict on average in each phase, and as they both have 18 wounds each, the winner will just be the one who can inflict the most damage on their opponent. So without further ado, let's get into this. First of all, we'll start with Magnus' psychic phase. With his warlord trait in play, he can cast 4 psychic powers, and he has access to a whole bunch. There is some strategy with which ones you'd want to pick. In the end I had a look through the disciplines he has access to, and we went for Death Hex, Glamour of Tzeentch, Weaver of Fates, and Smite to give him solid durability, the ability to cut straight through Mortarion's armour, and the chance to deal some mortal wounds in the psychic phase. Now Magnus is an insanely reliable caster, as he won't have taken damage this phase. He gets a mighty +2 to cast. His Primarch of the Thousand Sons ability allows him to reroll any dice rolls of 1 that are made as part of a psychic test, and between these two rules, he basically effortlessly casts whatever he wants. Mortarion, with his hatred of psykers, is pretty adept at denying psychic powers in return, so he can deny 3 of these. Death Hex is pretty much the most important power to go off, and it has Warp Charge 8 needed to remove the invul save of Mortarion. With Magnus' rerolls and +2 to cast, this goes off on around an 86%, and Mortarion has around a 11% chance to deny this, meaning that it goes off around about 3/4 of the time. It's just very hard to deny a psychic power when your opponent is casting on a +2. Next we have Glamour of Tzeentch. This is a Warp Charge 7 one to make Magnus -1 to hit, and this goes off on a 92% cast. Mortarion has chosen to throw his denial into other things here, and has chosen to let this one through. Next up we have Weaver of Fates, which Magnus can use to get himself a 3-up invul save. On a Warp Charge 6, this is very easy to cast for him, between +2 to cast and reroll 1s, and after Mortarion has had a chance to deny, which is a little better due to the chance of Magnus succeeding on a very low roll. It's around about 85% chance to cast. Finally we have Magnus' Smite, which between +2 to cast and reroll the double 1, which is actually the only chance that he can fail. He will actually only fail this less than 1 in 1,000 times of casting normally. Basically the Smite is going off. Mortarion again has a slightly higher chance to deny, as Magnus might cast this on quite a low roll. Magnus has his Super Smite ability via the Gaze of Magnus, meaning that he's putting out quite a lot of mortal wounds here. If he rolls an 11 or greater, it'll be a whopping 2d6 mortal wounds on the Smite, and everything else is a full d6 mortal wounds. Between the denial and Mortarion's disgustingly resilient special rule, the Primarch of the Death Guard will on average take 2.7 wounds from the fearsome Gaze of Magnus. Now we're on to Mortarion's psychic powers, and I chose to go for Miasma of Pestilence and Blades of Putrefaction here. A solid psyker, but not quite on the same level of Magnus. Mortarion will cast Miasma on a 72% chance, and Magnus with his +2 will deny this 40% of the time, leading to him getting his -1 to hit 43% of the time in total, nowhere near as reliable as Magnus' psychic powers. Next we have Blades of Putrefaction, which only needs a Warp Charge 5 to cast. This one will give Mortarion +1 to wound, and every roll of a 7 or more will deal a mortal wound to Magnus when he is attached with a plague weapon in close combat, and every mortal wound that we can force through Magnus' invul save will certainly be a bonus. In terms of the -1 to hit penalties and +1 to save bonus of Magnus, from here on I've factored the chances in of passing or failing each spell on the average damage output of the opposing Primarch, so if that's why they're dealing less damage in terms of hits or saves later on, then that's the result of these spells coming into effect. Next up we have Mortarion's Shooting. He can either have the option of using his Lantern Pistol or his Phosphex bombs if they're in range. If you do the maths, the Phosphex bombs will get 5 and a bit hits, almost 2 wounds, and on average 0.67 damage on Magnus. This slightly beats out his Lantern Pistol due to its high AP being fairly irrelevant, due to Magnus either having a 3 or 4-up invul save at this point. I've been kind to Mortarion and assumed that he's in range for his Phosphex bombs. not that it makes the biggest difference. So now we move on to the all-important assault phase. The fight phase kicks off with Mortarion's Host of Plague special rule, which on a 4+ deals d3 mortal wounds to each unit around him. This averages out to be an extra mortal wound thrown onto Magnus, at a 1 in 2 chance of causing an average of 2 mortal wounds. From there I've calculated the attacks of Mortarion using Silence. If he gets Blades of Putrefaction off, it makes more sense for him to use the Reaping Blow to get the extra attacks and more chance of extra mortal wounds. With this profile he has 21 attacks after Shock Assault, 16.7 will hit after spells are taken into effect, 13.9 will wound. Magnus will fail 5 saves, take 2.3 mortal wounds from Blades, for a total of 7.3 wounds on Magnus if Blades of Putrefaction goes off. If it doesn't, however, then he's better off using Eviscerating Blow. With his 7 attacks, he'll have 5.7 hits, 4.64 wounds, 1.7 failed saves, and an average of 5.8 wounds when you roll the d6 damage for it. So the total for Mortarion's base combat will be 6.4 wounds. I'm afraid I forgot to count his attacks with his Attendant's Claws and Teeth. They're pretty mediocre damage output, to be honest, if Blades isn't active, but if it is, then it actually adds a decent amount of extra damage, particularly with his Arch-Contaminator Warlord trait. This will bring Mortarion's average damage output to 7.5 wounds. Now if we come on to Magnus, he'll be striking with the Blade of Magnus, which is a Mighty Strength ×2, AP-4, flat damage 3 weapon, and he gets 8 attacks in close combat due to Hateful Assault on the first round. Now it makes an absolutely enormous difference as to whether or not Death Hex goes off or not. If it does, which is the vast majority of the time, then his 8 attacks become 7 and a bit hits after we take into account the possibility of Mortarion passing Miasma of Pestilence. He'll average 5.9 wounds, at damage 3 that's 17.8 damage, and when we've used Disgustingly Resilient, that trims it down to a total of 11.8 damage. If Magnus fails his cast or Mortarion manages to deny, then those 5.9 wounds only turn into 8.9 damage, due to Mortarion shielding a bunch of them on his 4+ invul from his Barber and Plate, which will average 6 wounds. If you take the percentage chance of both of these happening into account, on average Magnus will deal 10.35 wounds to Mortarion in close combat. Overall, this means that Mortarion's total damage on Magnus will be around 9 wounds, not 8 as it says here, as I forgot those attendants when I made the slide, but Magnus will average a massive 13 damage on Mortarion, so it's a pretty convincing win for Magnus on a one-on-one fight, all things being equal. Now I'm fully aware that this isn't a very realistic scenario for what would actually happen on the tabletop. Both of these primarchs might be taking other spells and will have the support of various units from each of their army, and in real life one of them would get the charge and get to deal all of their damage first, but I do still find it quite fun to weigh them up if the rules were warped to allow them to go head to head. Let me know down in the comments if you would have done anything differently with the psychic spells, or if I've managed to make any errors in this. There were a whole ton of numbers to crunch and an enormous amount of special rules and psychic powers to go over, and it has taken me several hours. If there's anyone else you'd like to see go head to head, then let me know as well. I'm sure we can do more 1v1 fights at some point in the future. If you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to Auspex Tactics. We have regular 40k gaming content coming out every single day. And if you'd like to support the channel, feel free to join my Patreon, as well as helping to support the creation of these videos. There are also some other benefits, such as prize draws, voting on the future of the channel, and my own tournament lists and battle reports when I attend events. Thank you very much for listening. I'll hope to see you guys in the next episode.